should I go back to the more reasonable looking one?
The big one's probably better. They seem to sound the same.
All right. Well,
Just whatever.
The same, I'd rather use the little one.
I can compare the two if you want.
Yeah.
Just whatever you do today, leave it that way because it's about time to retool the pipeline again.
Well, I mean, the big one's on there. I'm not going to change it right now. So.
Okay. All right. I think we're just good to go. We're live. All right. Put a little marker here. It's Monday, June 13th, 2022. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, AI and machine learning are a hot topic for a bunch of reasons, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And no, your chatbot is not sentient. This was one of the longer hiati we've ever had in Geek Nights, and it was only because the NHL couldn't do us a solid and schedule the Stanley Cup playoffs opposite Geek Nights. They had to schedule them.
Hold on. So first of all, they scheduled it the best they've ever scheduled it.
That is true.
Every other night, right? The problem was that we talked about this before. We had tickets to every home game right, we've ever had in our lives. B, we kept fucking winning. So we kept playing. And C, we had 2 series go to 7 and another one go to 6. So it's like we didn't have a break. If they would have swept someone, we could have had a Geek Nights time in there.
I mean, what I expected was the Rangers to crush the Pens, get crushed by Carolina, and that's it. And then instead, I got Game 7, and then a 4-2 series.
Right. And then on top of that, right, other life shit was going on. I think I discussed this on all the other platforms. So basically, I unexpectedly got a new job. I was not looking for a new job. I was very happy with the job I had. If you want to work at the place I was working, there's openings, and it's a good place to work. If the new job is not, is a trap, which it very well could be, I would go back there, no question. But yeah, so, recruiters, they come to me and it's like, I'm very sort of, professional, but also somewhat aggressive with them, right? In terms of like, I'm like, look, if your job is immoral, then I'm like, no, I won't work there. Bye. Right. If the job is morally acceptable, I'm like, all right, well, is it better be better than the job I have? The job I got is real good.
And there's two things I'll take. Like, I would take better because it's engaging work, better because it's better for the world, like it's activism, or it pays so much more that I'll just take the money.
Right. Well, I mean, some months ago, someone did make me an offer for more engaging, at least the product was, I guess, somewhat more interesting than music publishing, right? But, it was cool. And, but when it came time to actually make me an offer, it was similar monies. And I was like, this is not better than the job I have. And I demanded either 20% more monies or 4 days a week, right? Which would be 20% less time. I said one or the other. And they were like, too rich for our blood. Thanks. Have a nice day. And I'm like, all right. I still got a great job. I don't care.
Yeah, and also I respect a recruiter who's upfront and is like, "Oh, okay, never mind." Like,
well, that wasn't the recruiter. That was actually I went through a whole interview process and got to the end, and then recruiters always inflate. They like to tell you it's going to be a lot of money because then they convince you to go through the interview process, and then hoping that you'll feel bad and be bad at negotiating. And
I've always taken the exact opposite. My strategy in interviewing my entire life is even if the salary's low, if I like the job, I would go for it anyway. Make sure I crush the interview so they love me, and then threaten to walk away unless they pay me a lot.
I definitely crush the interviews and they love me, right? It was just that, while I would have taken that job in a heartbeat if I had no job, it wasn't significantly better than the job I had, so why change?
Yeah, well, that's rule number 2 of my life is no lateral moves ever.
Right. So anyway, another place comes along where I'm going to be working starting next month. And, it's like, it's got positives, it's got negatives, but it's not evil. The people are nice. I'm going through the interviews. Same deal, right? I crush the interviews. They're in love with me. They want to hire me so badly, right? And I'm like, I get to the negotiating part at the end, right? And I'm like, I'd really like to work 4 days a week, right? And I'm like, I know you're going to say no, but that's where I got to start my ask, right? It's like, and somehow, I don't know how, but the offer ended up being both 4 days a week and 20% more. So
all I got to say is if this works out, like if they're hiring and they need a product manager,
I'll just, we'll see what happens, right? This could be a trap. This could be too good to be true. This could be, who knows what's going to happen. But
it's definitely, it's exciting.
No. It's like I didn't want to go. I was like, I didn't want to leave the job I had, but I had kind of no choice.
Well, you know what it's like? It's like in a bidding game, or even like a train game or something, where I put forth some sort of like ridiculous lowball offer, like in Civ. I'm like, hey Scott, you gave me 3 luxury resources for like one nighter, and then the other side says okay, and I'm like, wait, what? What? I didn't expect you to say yes. Nobody says yes to that. What's going on?
I needed that night. That was the one nighter I needed to make a gun. Boom. Anyway, so yeah, that took up some time and distracted from Geek Nights. But now we're in the opposite situation, right? Whereas I don't have to work for a whole month. It's summertime. Yep. I worked on the website most of the day today, doing lots of stuff. The Geek Nights website, right? And then even when I start working next month, it won't be on Friday. I know there's no Geek Nights on Friday, but that still is going to give me time eventually to do some kind of content or something. At least some of those Fridays once in a while will be spent doing something Geek Nights internet content production related, right? So It's only a few games left.
Yep. Also, I am very confident Colorado's going to win. But
I said that early in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, what did we say? It didn't matter. Whoever came out of the Eastern Conference is just going to be sacrificed before the Nidhogg that is the Colorado Avalanche.
That's what's going to happen.
We were just fighting over who gets to have the honor of being crushed by them in the finals.
Well, we'll see.
But the one thing, Emily and I ended up being at the last home game because that's like how our tickets broke down.
We were at the last game at Madison Square Garden, but the game was being played in Florida.
But there is a technology angle here because something happened that this happens. It always happens in the playoffs, but maybe because I haven't paid attention to the playoffs or gone to games in a long time, but also it feels like it was more than like the last time I went to playoffs games. The production value of the technology, the lighting and the sound and the stuff happening in the arena leveled up every round of the playoffs. And every time it leveled up more than I expected it to. So in the last game we went to,
they had smoke, they had lasers.
So not just lasers. I want to talk about the lasers. They had lasers that are, if they hit a person in the eye, would be fucking dangerous. That's were
true. Yes.
So bright.
This is a laser that was like going across MSG from one end to the other, right?
And culminating to like a spot, maybe an inch. Like inch and a half in diameter. That was like so bright.
Setting the building on fire, but it's like they were
like if that hit you in the eye, I think you would be insta-blinded. And it looks like they were hard, and also they were bright enough to be visible just in the ambient air slightly, which
they also combined them with the smoke machine that come out from under the scoreboards.
But some of them were occasionally touching briefly the bottom of the American flag that's hanging up there, and it was like a sun every time it touched it. So what's interesting is if you look at how they worked this out, they were all aimed, and there had better have been hardware controls ensuring that they couldn't aim anywhere else. They were flying around, but they were only aiming at the boundaries between the levels in the arena, like the little walls.
There were some that were aimed at the bottom of the boards on the ice, and there were some that were aimed on the flat, where the horizontal scoreboards are in between the 100 and the 200 level. But yeah, they were basically not hitting anywhere there were seats and anywhere there could be a human body, right?
Which is
flying or something.
Yep, which is just a fascinating use of technology, because if there weren't hardware lockouts, if they were relying solely on the programming of the controllers for those laser lights, as someone who has done formal risk analysis professionally for more than a decade, that I cannot imagine what the risk assessment was of that situation.
I mean, they could have been doing it with software, just the software really good.
Yeah, I don't
know how that shit works.
I deeply distrust software interlocks on dangerous hardware.
Yeah, but anyway, They had there was a lot of cool special effects going on. Yeah.
So in some actual tech news, let's talk about web push for Safari.
Well, so Apple's WWDC happened, right? This is where at the time of year where they have a big developer conference for Apple developers, and they announce all their new Apple shit. And usually it's all like what's going to be updated in iOS, what's going to be updated in macOS, all that kind of stuff, right? And the big update they announced was this sort of something stage, center stage, something, I forget what it's called, Apple stage something, main stage? No, not that. Stage Manager, there it is, Apple Stage Manager, which is basically, we talk about a lot how Apple will take something that someone else has already invented and sort of just polish it and make a new UI for it and act like they invented it. Like when they came out with, Spaces or whatever, virtual desktops, right? And it's like virtual desktops have been on Unix and, X11 Windows systems for decades.
Yep.
And they acted like they invented it. Like
it was even funnier because by the time that appeared was around the time when I had 2 giant monitors and didn't really use virtual desktops anymore.
Yeah, but anyway, the Stage Manager, which they just announced, is basically it's effectively virtual desktops, right? You group your windows by task, and then you can sort of, bring out, that's how I use virtual desktops anyway, right? It's like I'll have a virtual desktop for each task, and then you just, you swap out all your windows for a whole different set of windows to work on something else, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like on the other virtual desktop that I'm not looking at right now, there's all the stuff to work on the Geek Nights website, right? But all that's hidden because now I'm at the desktop where I can do a Geek Nights episode, right? So the Stage Manager is a new UI to effectively, group applications by task and switch between tasks. And it's actually really nice looking. I kind of like it. I wish my computer did that. Yeah. But not enough to go get a Mac. But they are bringing it to iPad, which is nice. But they're not bringing it to iPads that don't have M1 processors, which I think is actually a big problem. And that, Apple has always been known for the one thing they do. I think the best thing Apple does is that they support really old hardware with new OS updates for a long time.
Yeah.
Right? My iPhone 7 which I guess I could have waited another year or two before updating it, but I guess it was 7 years of lifetime. If you bought an iPhone 7 the day it came out, you could have used it for 7 years before it stopped getting iOS updates, and you could have even kept using it longer than that. You just eventually might run into situations where, updates to iOS apps don't work because your OS is too old, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I only kept my iPhone 7 for 5 years, and my Apple Watch 3, I bought that. I'm wearing it right now. It's still good, but it looks like later this year, it's not going to be good anymore. They're going to have an iOS update that, a watch OS update that finally puts the third watch, right? Meanwhile, they're already on like watch 8 or something, or I forget what number they're on.
Yeah, I have the most recent one that's actually out, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it'll last you many years, right? Whereas Android devices, they get maybe a handful of years of updates, and then that's it.
In 2 years, I went through 2.5 Android watches.
Yeah, I mean, I used to update my iPhone every 2 years because the contract would be every 2 years. And because the hardware updates were so significant, like what's iPhone 3G compared to iPhone 4, compared to iPhone 5, compared to 6, compared to 7, right? It's like those are big leaps. But then after 7, like the leaps weren't there anymore. I went from 7 to 12 mini, 11, whatever, the first mini one, whatever number that was, right? So anyway. So yeah, that's they got their iOS updates and whatnot, right? And the big one feature that they announced that really intrigued me was these sort of live notifications, right? I forget what they called them. But, there's certain situations where, let's say you order something like food to be delivered, right? Right now, if you turn on all the notifications for your food delivery app of choice, right? What they'll message you and be like, "We got your order." Then they'll give you another notification. The restaurant started working on it. Yep. Another notification. They finished working on it. Another one. The delivery's coming. Another one. The delivery's close. The delivery's here. You get like a pile of notifications for this one thing, right? And it's like your phone is going ding, 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 right? And that's not a great user experience. It's kind of a mess, and you have to clear out a pile of notifications, right? Really, that whole process should be one notification that's sort of the notification itself live updates to tell you the current status when you look at it. And they added that. It's basically, so if you were to now order food on a new, once the new iOS comes out and the apps update themselves, you would get a note, you would order some food, a notification would come up, and that notification would just stay there and always be displaying the current status of your food order. And when it was done, that thing would go away and it would sort of be on your home screen, right? And you could do the same thing for other similar like time-gated events, like a sporting event. It's like, okay, the sporting event started. Now there's a thing on your lock screen showing you the live score, and then when the game's over, it's gone, right? It's just one notification, one thing that knows when to come and when to go away and update itself rather than having multiple notifications. So that's going to be a good thing. I like that. So the thing Rim talked about, the web push, right? So speaking of notifications, as long as they've had notifications on iOS, right? And the way it's worked is that, you had to get an app in the App Store, get an Apple developer account, right? Get your app approved, get someone to install your app, get someone to give your app notification permissions, and then the app can notify them within certain bounds, right, of behavior that Apple deemed acceptable. And then, it's like, in order to not ruin the battery life and annoy the users, right, with lots of notifications. So that's the way it's been. You might notice, if you're anyone who uses a normal computer still, that like even today, desktop web browsers do notifications. Like you can go to a website and it'll pop up an annoying message like, hey, you want notifications from this website? Huh? And if you say yes, it's like your web browser is basically going to be keeping open like a little thing in the background, like a little service in the background on your computer. And a website, just any old website, can send notifications and they'll show up like in Windows or Mac, like as OS level notifications, and that's, it's nice when you want to use it.
Yep. Right? 99% of the time, you don't want to use it like that, though.
Right. When you want to use it, it's nice. Like, let's say at the game for the website for train games, right? Close your tab for train games and still get a notification in OS level that's like, hey, it's your turn in the train game, right? That's nice. Or Gmail, like, hey, you got an email that's an important email, OS level notification, even though your browser might be closed or, whatever. So it can be nice when you want to do it. But what Apple's going to do is they're going to enable web push, right, on macOS and iOS via Safari. So this means that somebody with a web page and no iOS app, no Mac app whatsoever can now send you notifications on iOS just from a website. And so there's a video here that's actually targeted towards web developers who want to implement this feature, but it's also useful because it tells users how the feature is going to work. And the key here is that they are not going to allow you to pop up a thing like, hey, you want notifications? The user must click or do some action in order to start the I want notification
That is
process.
Key. That is very similar to how MailChimp dominated all the mailing services in the early days when they forced either second verification or active subscription as opposed to opt-out.
Yep. So it's the example they give is like a website that has a bell icon, and they're like, you can't ask the user for notification permission until they click the bell icon. Then they can say, yes, I want notifications from this website. Right. And the second thing is that, it is technically possible to do this the web push and send messages to someone's web browser and have JavaScript take action in response to those messages without displaying a notification to the user. You could just sort of, get the user's computer to do processing or whatever. And Apple's like, yeah, you can, you can hurt someone's battery life like that. B, you're using someone's CPU, possibly their phone CPU.
Hey, phone, mine up Bitcoin for me.
Without them realizing you're doing it, right? So Apple has a system in place where if you don't display a notification to the user quickly enough after you send them a web push, and you do that like 3 times or something, then that's it. They take away your web push permission. It's like, you're done, right? You can't do it anymore. Your whole domain is just blocked.
Ooh, I noticed this side thing in the article you linked to around service worker APIs to handle
service worker.
Yep,
APIs.
that seems to be exactly what this is. This looks pretty good.
A service worker API is basically the JavaScript that's sitting on your computer that will leap into action once a notification comes in from the internet, right? So it's like, it's like you leave instructions on the person's phone or on their computer of like what to do if they receive a message from website X. And then so when website X sends a message, the Safari browser says, "Oh, where did this message come from? It came from website X. We'll send it. Do I have a service worker for website X? I do." And it sends the message to the service worker for website X.
One of the examples they give on like what
it's supposed to do,
what they expect you to use this for, is actually a really good one. I'm just going to quote the website: "Receiving centralized updates to expensive to calculate data, such as geolocation or gyroscope, so multiple pages can make use of one set of data."
Yeah, you could go to a website, click on like do something, go away, and then once the thing is done, you'll get a notification that's like, "Hey, thing is done." You click on it, and that will take you to the web page with the results of the thing that is now done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, you're now going to be able to send notifications to users of iOS devices without having to make an iOS app and get in the App Store or give Apple money or make an Apple developer account or anything. And that is kind of a big deal because, for example, FrontRowCrew.com could make it so that you get a notification on your phone when there's a new Geek Nights episode, even though that we don't have an official iPhone app whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, and the notifications are much more useful on the phone than they are on the desktop. So I foresee, and a lot of people only have phones. So I think what you're going to see is a lot more websites implementing notifications, implementing them in a way that's acceptable to Apple and won't annoy you by asking you to accept notifications just from visiting the website.
This is where Apple often serves as a thought leader because they will implement and enforce design patterns that are pleasant to the user, and then the rest of the ecosystem is usually forced to basically follow Apple's rules because people get used to
I think that's Flash. That's how they killed Flash, right?
I think that's a big part of why so many people perceive Apple products to be more pleasant to use, because there's usually at least one design pattern where Apple has said, "Nope, that sucks. We're just going to ban it."
I mean, listen, if I wasn't somebody who played games with Steam, right, and B, developed software that was like Linuxy software, right, I'll get a Mac, right? There'd be no reason for me to not have a Mac, right?
Playing games,
an iPad and an iPhone, there'd be no reason to not have a Mac as like those are the two things, and Mac will basically never do those things.
Playing games and editing extreme video with a real GPU.
Mac can do that. You can run all the Adobe software on there, no problem.
Oh yeah, what you run into is you can't get a good GPU.
Well, I mean, if you're the GPU, if you get the Mac Studio, it's going to be for video editing. You'll be fine, right?
So in some other news, this is actually a big deal. New York, I think all that's left is the governor has to sign this, and we have a pretty okay governor right now, considering the span of what New York governors tend to be like.
Governor, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, we're gonna primary her out anyway.
It could be a lot worse. It could be a lot better.
Yep. But we have our state legislature has passed a right to repair law in New York for electronics, and because New York is so big, this could have national ramifications. Basically, this law, unfortunately, it doesn't actually cover agricultural equipment or cars or most hardware. It really only covers things like cell phones and like digital technology. The definition's a little bit weird.
It's limited, but it's
it's a start.
Nothing, right?
Kind of like that weak sauce gun bill that looks like it might actually pass the Senate because they got 10 Republicans on board. Yes, it's not
limited,
enough,
but it's not nothing.
Yeah, not nothing is the best you can do sometimes. So the bill,
better than nothing,
requires digital electronics manufacturers to make repair instructions and parts available not just to technicians who are independent, but also directly to consumers.
Right. Well, I mean, Apple did make all this repair stuff available to everybody. There are some articles out there of people who did it. And the thing is, it's like, yeah, they'll send you all this ridiculous equipment to like fix your iPhone. And you have to send it back within a limited time frame so you don't get charged for it, because it's thousands of dollars of expensive equipment and instructions. Like, you can do it yourself. You can succeed at it. But it's, it's still not for the faint of heart, right? It's really, it's like they would satisfy the law in that, yes, they'll send it to just any old person, but it's really designed for somebody who is a professional. It's
very much analogous.
A repair shop, right?
Well, it's very much analogous to car repair and how you don't have to take your car to the dealership you brought it from to get it repaired. You go to any fucking mechanic. Some mechanics are good, some mechanics are bad, some mechanics are cheap, some mechanics are expensive.
Can do it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. But you can do that because of laws and regulations. And now we're applying the same principle, at least to phones and laptops and a lot of digital or digital adjacent goods. It's
a real my thing of the day from, I think, the last time we did shows, right? Statistics Fix on YouTube. I'm still loving that guy's channel. He's just, it's this guy who admits he doesn't know much about electronics, but somehow he orders some broken shit on eBay, he fixes it, and then he's real excited when it works. He's like, yeah, it worked. It's like, it's really fun. It's like,
but how did this get passed?
Fixing stuff these days.
Like, how did this come to pass? Because with any time a law passes anywhere in the U.S., the real question is, how did that good law make it through our government? Like, how did that happen? Because if there's a pattern to that, you could make more good things happen, theoretically. So one, it happened in an extremely blue state. Like, this is a state that is completely controlled by the Democrats. Two, it's only within one state. It just happens to be a very powerful state. See also how California, a lot of companies follow California rules because they don't want to have trouble with the California market. It's too big to ignore. And three, a number of
that companies don't put gay people in their movies. The China market too big.
Exactly. Yeah. So there were a number of public groups, advocacy groups, that were aggressively fighting for this in New York State for at least 5 years now. This is the culmination of years and years of constant letter writing, bothering random state senators, like harassing government officials, donating money. This was a lot of work to get this bill passed from a lot of very, very dedicated activists in this very tiny space. So my advice to you is, if you care about something about on this level, go harass like the state legislature in an important blue state. That is probably the best avenue you've got.
A long period of time with a lot of help, right?
Yep.
That's how you can make it happen.
You've got to be annoying to the point to where a state government in the United States would rather do what you want to make you go away than continue to listen to you. It's a strategy. In some other news, that's a good segue into the main bit. We can't ignore DALL-E because it is the new Wordle in terms of completely filling my Twitter stream with.
Yeah, it's this little AI-ish, right, machine learning image generating model app that is available to the general public on some sort of throttled basis. You can't, just use it because it takes quite a bit of computing power to make it go.
Yep. And what we're playing with is the mini version, not the full-on version, of course.
Right. And it's free to try to use, though. You just got to get through the throttling. And yeah, you can type in any old text, and it will search its database of images, and it will try to combine those images into new images that match your description. So you could write like, rim jumping up and down, and it will try to make pictures of rim jumping up and down, right? For however it understands those words. And you can have a lot of fun creating a lot of really interesting images by typing lots of pop culture combinations into this thing.
I just got it to make Shrek riding a bicycle through Penn Station, and it pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, it's, you got to sort of learn what kind of things it does a good job with and what kinds of things it doesn't do a good job with.
And if you read their website for the full AI model, it's interesting because it really focuses on natural language and detailed descriptions. So an example of a good search would be a storefront that has the word OpenAI written on it, or an armchair in the shape of an avocado. Mm-hmm. The exact same cat on the top as a sketch on the bottom. Like things like that. The more specific you are, the better it is. And it basically, it seems like it's very similar. Oh, actually, no, now that I'm scrolling down to the website, they even call it out. They say it's similar, so it's not just me. This is basically doing the same kind of thing that GPT-3 does, which is a natural language neural network where you can tell it things like, write an article about this new cell phone. It'll write a kind of shitty article about this new cell phone that's good enough. Like, it's enough to start with. It gives you a starting point. These...
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of good memes people have generated with it. So
Yep. And we're going to edge into a little bit of... People are talking about this. I've seen people having such ridiculous takes as this will destroy jobs. This AI will take away my source of income. Like people are overreacting to the wrong parts about this.
Those are tongue in cheek. This will take my job. I don't think it's serious.
I've seen a few serious people, but it's more serious in the same way as the people who would complain that digital animation destroyed like my ability to make money inking cells.
Anyway,
a little marker here. Things of the day. So I'm on a big Star Trek kick lately, and my cup overfloweth because there's a lot of new Star Trek. Also a lot of old Star Trek that I never fully watched that I'm digging through. Currently near the end of a rewatch / first watch of Deep Space Nine. And my thing of the day is, if you're familiar, in the original Star Trek, or TOS as nerds will call it, the original series, there was a parallel sort of sister show that was official, it's canonical, but it was animated. Filmation animation, like really limited animation. It's a full-on Star Trek. You've seen it out there. But
I've seen it, but I don't know that many people have like watched the whole thing, but I've definitely seen that it exists.
But what's notable about it, other than the fact that it is fully canonical, is that it has a distinctive style. It has it's hard to describe the style in full, but it uses a lot of like weird, almost Dutch angles. It has a lot of close-ups of a face just reacting to something and not saying anything while music plays for like 5 or 6 seconds at a time. Clearly, it's a lot of the things they were doing to reduce how much animation they had to make in a Star Trek to crank this show out. But it has a very distinctive style as a result.
Very Super Frenzy.
So this video is from some fans of this, Grazelle Automations, and they have made a 5.5 minute long video that is fully animated. It is basically an episode of Star Trek Voyager condensed into and animated in this style. And what makes this sublime is they didn't just take the audio from this episode of Star Trek Voyager and just like animate it in the animation style. They reworked it. It has a soundtrack like the original animation instead of like Voyager. They added all the weird pregnant pauses. They moved the dialogue around. It mimics completely everything that made that original animated show distinctive. It's kind of amazing how like they hit it out of the park.
I mean, I do appreciate that, right? I talk a lot about how, like, hey, why not make something new in the old style, right? Why not just make, a noir movie with some black and white film as if it was 1940.
Scott,
whatever,
you ever see a movie called Brick?
No.
Really? It's a straight up film noir, and it's about a brick of cocaine, but it's set in like a dumpy high school, like earnestly. And it's this film is, I can't believe you've never seen.
I'm sure there are people who do it, but it's not common, right? It's
it's not common.
How old movies, they always open with like, credits and like a classical music playing and right.
Yeah.
It's like, what if you went to the movie theater today and a movie started like that? It's like, no one does that.
Yeah, it is rare. Like, case in point, Hateful Eight, like that movie. That's what it was like to go to an old timey 4.5 hour long movie with an intermission.
A little bit. Anyway. So thing of the day. So here's his book that's coming out. The book is not actually coming out until September this year, right? But there is currently a free chapter 1 preview, and you can get an early access ebook for $32, and you can pre-order the print book, And that will also include the early access ebook for $40. And the book is actually, you might think, it's an electronics book because it's called Open Circuits, but actually, this is a photography book, right? It's a book where basically they take electronic components, right? The free chapter is passive components, but then the other chapters, you have semiconductors, electromechanics, cables and connectors, etc., right? And each chapter is basically photographs of not just the components, because like you know what a resistor looks like, but mostly cross sections of the components. Right? It's like you might know that, like, yeah, a capacitor is like, you know in the theory and principle of what's in there, right? There's maybe some oil in there or something, right? But like, if I said, all right, I'm about to cut open a capacitor right in half and show you the inside, it's discharged, don't worry, right? Would you know what you're about to see?
I would, but most people wouldn't, and I wouldn't for most electronic components. Just I used to desolder and resolder capacitors as a job.
But did you cut a capacitor in half?
Yes, actually, because I had to prove that capacitors I was taking out of computer motherboards were defective because of the electrolyte solution inside of them.
Anyway, so the point is,
I was doing that at IBM.
It's a book of photography, and it's all the photographs are basically the insides and cross sections of electronic components, so you can see what the hell's actually in there.
This is cool biz.
Pretty fascinating. I recommend you download the free first chapter, and if you like what you see, well, there's the not free options that will, you can pre-order for September. Oh, and look, it says use coupon code pre-order to get 25% off. I never understood that. It's like I'm on the purchasing page. Why are you writing the coupon code right there? Why not just lower the price by 25%?
I can explain that with modern pricing theory. There is I talked about this in GeekNights a while ago, but this is a direct example of it. This is a simple example, but the idea is it's the same reason coupons exist in the modern world.
But the coupon is right on the page.
Here's what so despite it being right on the page, the data on how many people copy paste it right there when they buy it versus just don't bother is extremely useful data, because terrifyingly, that is how you generate lists of people who care more about time than money, or more about money than time.
People who know how to read. That's what you generate a list of. People who know how to read.
I'll put it diplomatically. You can infer a lot about the future behavior of someone on an e-commerce site based on whether or not they will copy-paste the word pre-order in all caps from one part of a page into another part of a page to get 25% off. You can also infer a lot about someone who will not do that. I'll just leave it at that. That is something they teach product managers.
Anyway, you took this one pricing training one time, and you just keep going on and on about it.
I've taken way more than one training. This is something I've been studying for the last 5 years. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. You went to a training 5 years ago.
But anyway, in the meta moment, the GeekNights Book Club book, Nine Fox Gambit, the next Thursday episode, we are doing the show. If you start reading it now, you can easily finish by next Thursday. The book is not long, nor is it hard to read. And if you bounce off of the first 2 paragraphs, that's a bunch of proper nouns and calendrical heresy, you'll figure out what's going on real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave it at that. I already started the second book because that's how I roll.
Yeah, meta moment. Also, I guess I'm working on the GeekNights website. It's coming along very nicely. I'm basically right now I'm working on a thing for uploading the new episodes, which is going to work a lot like the way you upload videos on YouTube, only obviously less fancy. But drag an MP3 in, click upload, type in a bunch of metadata, push save, that whole thing.
Yep.
Right?
I got a little meta bit, so I started this up again. I hadn't been doing it for a while because we hadn't really been reviewing a lot of tabletop games. I guess something happened in the world over the last 3-ish years that prevented us from going to a bunch of conventions and playing a ton of tabletop games that we normally would, that fuels a good chunk of Geek Nights. But it turns out, since we stopped playing a lot of board games, we had done 5 more episodes where we reviewed a tabletop game. So I have now cut them out and put them on YouTube, just the main bits, just the reviews. And I'm going to link to, if you don't know, there's a playlist out there that has 78 of our Geek Nights tabletop game reviews with no news, no main bits, none of that other Geek Nights crap. It's just the review and nothing else.
What I think is really interesting and probably a mistake that we made, right? Given that we don't really care about marketing, but
putting the main bit at the end and
well, no, is that if you look around, right, and say like the tabletop gaming community, right, nobody like knows, like you never see them saying like, oh, I'll see occasionally threads like best tabletop podcast were never mentioned ever, right? But 78 episodes is more episodes than most tabletop podcasts in total, right? So it's only like not even 10% of Geek Nights.
We have more Wednesday episodes than most anime podcasts that have ever existed.
Yep, pretty much.
Yep. But anyway, I think I've been doing this for the tabletop content because I find that even more so than anything else we do, a succinct, deep review of a tabletop game is the kind of thing that someone will send to a friend to try to convince them to play a game. And they're useful to travel around independent of the rest of the Geek Nights crap. You don't need to hear about us talking about biking to work for 20 minutes just to find out if Princess of Florence is worth playing. So this is out there. And before you ask, why aren't you doing this for the anime reviews? I stopped because even a fucking anime review that had no screenshots, no content of any kind from the anime, it's just the audio of me and Scott talking about it, got a copyright takedown on YouTube, and I was just fucking done. Anime is dead to me on YouTube.
Okay, well, because they just they're just indiscriminately, they're not actually checking for a copyright violation. They just see the name of an anime in the title or description of the thing, and then they just they just send you a thing. They don't check to see what's
amazing.
In your video.
My YouTube channel only gets this for anime content and literally nothing else.
Well, that's because the anime, we all know this. How many times have we talked about this? Japan is really wild with their copyright enforcement. Right?
Yep.
Like people in Japan are like going to actual criminal prison for like pirating some mangas or whatever, right? They are super strict about it. And obsessed with enforcing it. Look at the way Nintendo, what they did to the Bowser.
Oh yeah,
not the guy who.
Look what Nintendo did to Bowser.
Not the character, and not the president of Nintendo of America, but the pirate guy Bowser, who was.
Well, we'll talk about that on the next Tuesday show because there's that situation's kind of fucked up. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
So. AI has been in the news a bunch, not just because of, just the industry moving fast, and not just because of DALL-E, but because something a little bit, I don't want to say silly, but the story we're about to talk about, there's a lot of facets to it, and we're not going to be able to cover everything.
And there's so much we don't know. We can only talk about what we do know as, people who read a couple articles and some blog posts.
Yep,
right?
but I'm going to head off before we get into it. The AI, the chatbot that is at the center of this cluster of stories is absolutely not sentient. I want to be clear about that.
What is sentient? You want to have a philosophy episode?
We could. Right? I am. If there's one argument that I am well prepared to have and go on forever about,
if something appears to be sentient, is it not sentient? If no one can tell.
Yep. But there is a lot of hard evidence that this is not sentient in any meaningful way. Basically, I'm going to super summarize this. An engineer who works at Google believed and then claimed publicly that a LaMDA chatbot is sentient and deserves sentient rights.
Right. So my opinion on its sentience, because I can actually say why it's not sentient, in my opinion, right?
I have a few articles queued up that also say in a hard science reason why even people who are...
There's a real simple reason that I alone, according to what I think counts as sentience, right, do not consider it to be sentient, is that this chatbot, the way it works is you send some text to it, and then it sends some text back, right? It never just sends some text on its own. It doesn't just say things out of nowhere, right? It's just responding to an input, right? It won't just say something. And you might think, well, you could easily just sort of have some sort of clock hooked up to it so that it would say things on its own, right?
And there are humans who have particular kinds of executive dysfunctions where they are a human and no one's going to argue that a human is not sentient, but they will not take any action on their own. But if you stimulate their brain in a specific way, they will spontaneously begin taking actions like a normal seeming person.
Sure. But regardless, even if you did that to this bot, right? It's like, well, what are you you still have to you can't just be like, hey, there's no way to be like, hey, say something. You have to, actually say something at it, right? It's all it's doing is processing text you give it. If you don't give it any text, then it doesn't do anything. It's just a text processor.
I'd go even further.
Even though its responses to text may very well imitate thought, right? Or give the illusion of thought, there is no thought on its own to happen there. And
well, case in point, imagine a Turing test, in a chat room. The typical chat with something and then decide if it is sentient or not, or decide if it is human or not. If you train a model with humans administering Turing tests and responding to Turing tests, you will get very human-sounding responses because a lot of humans will respond to the kinds of questions humans ask bots to see if they're human the way a human would. It's basically a self-reinforcing model.
Well, no, but I think that, let's say you did a Turing test, right? The oldest test in the book, right?
Yep.
What if you did a Turing test against this bot, no matter what text it sent back to you, no matter how convincing that text was, it would always be, I send a sentence, it sends back a sentence. 1, 1, 1, 1. It would never send back 2 or 3 or send me back 1 when I didn't send it anything, right?
There are some chatbots that can do things like that, though.
Sure, but if I was conversing with a human, even if the human was very illiterate and bad at writing, there wouldn't be the sort of 1, 1, 1, 1 pattern going on, and therefore that would be a strong indicator that it would be human, compared to the 1, 1, 1, 1, where even if the text was vastly superior, right? So anyway, there's this guy. This guy will there's too much. I never heard of this person before this week.
Yep.
And the person, the research I did on the internet indicates this is a very interesting person.
Capital I.
With a complicated history. And you know what? It's not all positive. It's not all negative, but congratulations on having a really interesting life, this person, right?
Yep.
What was their name?
Oh, their name is Blake Lemoine.
Okay. So yeah, very interesting individual who, at least up until very recently, was an employee at Google and was doing some sort of AI ethics type research, right? And it is well known that Google has gotten rid of many of its AI ethics people, which is not great considering the AI stuff they're doing, even whether you want to argue it's actually AI or not. The point is machine learning type stuff. There's still a lot of ethical issues that you need somebody to, keep a watchful eye on. That's not just Google. Right.
We'll talk about what those ethical issues actually are in a moment.
Sure. So yeah, this person was working there, and they believe that this particular chatbot that I just said is not sentient. They believe otherwise. And they went through all kinds of processes and HR stuff and, raising issues and getting help.
Looks like they tried to get a lawyer even to represent the AI.
Right. They were doing all kinds of stuff that they documented, and also their newspapers reporting on it that they talked to, and all kinds of stuff that, we really don't know anything about other than what's been published, to report it to Google. And the end result was that Google put them on administrative leave, which means you're weird and we're going to fire you soon. Right? That's what it means. And based on the available information and the checkered, interesting history of the individual, it's kind of hard to, not read it both ways, right? It's like, well, this person's just, losing it on the one hand, but B, you could easily also believe that, Google's up to no good, even while you don't necessarily have to agree that the chatbot is sentient to believe that Google's up to no good.
But I guess the situation here, I'm going to actually quote the Waypar article because this pretty much sums it up. The reporting around this was, this engineer thinks it's sentient and Google denies it. But to quote WAPO, most academics and AI practitioners say the words and images generated by artificial intelligence systems such as LaMDA produce responses based on what humans have already posted on Wikipedia, Reddit, message boards, and every other corner of the internet. And that doesn't signify that the model understands meaning. Quote, we now have machines that can mindlessly generate words, but we haven't learned how to stop imagining a mind behind them. And it goes on. There's a lot of discussion around this, but basically, this person seems to have now gone to the press. There's a lot of public conversation around this, and the public conversation is getting further and further away from the actual technology involved here.
And the reality, and, you know, because there's so many blanks that are not filled in due to things that have not... It's interesting because enough has been reported and enough has been blogged by the person in question that there's a lot of information available relative to what you would normally have in these sort of scenarios where someone's like, let go. More than there were in these, you know, the previous AI researchers who got let go from Google. But still plenty of unknowns and plenty of people talking who don't understand technology, like Rim said. So that empty space of knowledge gets filled with conspiracies, conjecture, rumors, nonsense, BS, et cetera. You all got to watch out for all that.
So first, let's talk about these like linguistic models and sort of how they work or what they mean. Because basically what they do, and again, we're super generalizing for a lot of reasons. You feed in a ton of human language, and then they will make predictions based on trends and relationships and statistics from that set of language, so that if there is a set of text, generate more text that's like the text that I was given.
Or related to the text, or you know, whatever, right?
Now, what these are often actually used for in the real world are things like when you try to get customer service and a human doesn't respond, a chatbot responds, and it tries to get information out of you and help you as much as possible before they
aren't even using that. A lot of those are just straight up scripted.
Yep, they're scripted, or they have extremely simplistic models, usually just looking for keywords. Beyond that, they're often used, there's a burgeoning industry of using them to pre-write simplistic articles, news articles, reviews, anything like low-hanging fruit, press release nonsense. Basically, you feed in all the text around a situation into these models, and they'll tell it what to write about, and it'll spit out an article that clearly is unreadable, but it gets the broad strokes down. It almost like it writes a crappy review of a phone, and then you hire a person who's maybe way less skilled than someone who would write an entire article with research from nothing to clean it up and make it look like a human wrote it and publish it. And that is a worrying and growing trend in journalism, but that's a use for these things.
Yeah, I mean, the number one use is everybody knows is the Siris, Alexas, and OK Googles, right? That's the number one use that consumers are aware of, right, for all this nonsense. So.
A dangerous use that is coming more and more to the forefront, but already has existed in a practicable form for a long time with text, is having something that is able to write novel content in the recognizable style of a known person, but without any input from said person. You could get this to write an article that sounds a lot like how I write an article. Look, if you read it, you'd think, wow, Rim wrote that, but I didn't write it.
Mm-hmm. You could just take all the Stephen King books, throw them into this thing, and then say, write a Stephen King book, and you'll be surprised when it comes out.
Especially if you look at some later Stephen King books, but I digress.
Maybe those were written by us.
Now, the other ethical side of this coin is I absolutely believe we will build machine intelligences that are equivalent to, superior to, or at least analogous to human intelligence. Like, we're not special. We're just a biological machine. But I don't think we're anywhere near that point.
So far, not in our lifetime, probably, right?
And of course, as we approach that point, there's a huge body of ethics around what is ethical to do to and with such a machine intelligence. But we are so impossibly far from that technology.
Right. What we have now is basically just a giant spreadsheet, right? And then fancy spreadsheet lookups, right? It's like there's no moral or ethical problem with turning off the computer or deleting the spreadsheet or anything like that, right? But there are lots and lots and lots of ethical and moral issues regards to using the giant spreadsheet.
Yep.
Right? You know, you've seen plenty of people talking about how like image recognition is racist, if that's true. You know, automatic like photo editing stuff, racist, also true.
Yep, because the data encodes the implicit biases and dimensionality of our existing flawed society.
Right. The spreadsheet was filled with data from humanity, and therefore the flaws of humanity, right, and the systems we already have make their way into the system. So it's like, you know, they don't
just make their way into the system. They define the system, and then because of the scale of this computing, they amplify those flaws.
Yeah, it's like you could be like, you know, let's say you wanted to have something that like the computer helped you to, you know, find the like, you know, decide to just give someone mortgages or not. And it's like, well, the people who've been deciding to give mortgages or not all this time are racist. So if you fill it with the history of all mortgages handed out forever, and guess what? It's going to keep being racist, right? And only white people are going to get mortgages.
Yep.
So.
And this leads into, like, you remember way back, we barely talked about this in Geek Nights. It was a long time ago, but Google Assistant, they announced a feature long time ago where Google Assistant could, if you, like, used an app or, like, clicked on a restaurant in Google Maps and you wanted to make a reservation or, like, put in an order, and the only way you could interact with that business was via a phone number. Like they didn't have like a Grubhub or like a web form to fill out or anything, then it would call that business and a human sounding voice would just interact with the person on the other end of the line to answer your question. Like, are you open today? It's Memorial Day, and get the answer and give it back to you. And that opened a whole shitstorm. On one hand, businesses were afraid that they would be inundated with thousands and thousands of calls that were automated. Luddites were afraid that this would replace human communication, even though I kind of wanted to. Like, I don't want to waste a human's time calling them to make a dinner reservation. Like, I don't want to waste humans sorting that out. We could sort that out easily with technology. It could be an interesting
better website, and it won't have to call you. Right?
Yep.
Come on.
Exactly. But most businesses don't have a better website. I mean, that's why things like Grubhub exist in the first place, unfortunately.
Get your shit together.
Yep. But in the end, Google kind of backed away from a lot of this, and they agreed to, among other things, if Google Assistant calls a business, it will tell you it's a robot. It will like explicitly say what it is before it interacts with you. And that opened a whole bunch of ethical concerns that are still not fully explored. And that is like baby's first use of this kind of technology.
Right. So, regarding the actual news story guy, right, with the chatbot that is not sentient, but they believe it is.
Yep.
The major ethical concern that I see with that particular thing is that, you know, even though this person involved is, you know, I guess we'll keep using the word interesting,
yep.
right, unique individual, they are convinced that it's sentient, right? If
that's all that I would argue. So this person may have failed what I'm going to now call the reverse Turing test.
Maybe. But regardless, this bot thing, right, that is not sentient is software that is capable of convincing some percentage of the world population that it is sentient. And
so if I loaded up the history of everything I've ever typed into this thing, say someone else did it nefariously, they could probably make a Discord bot that could, like if Scott messaged it, it would respond and very plausibly seem like me.
Yeah, but I mean, that in and of itself could be used for nefarious things. Right?
I mean, look at the online discourse right now, the massive sea of disinformation, Russian bots everywhere. There are a lot of people who are fooled by bots on social media already when other people will look at one sentence from one of those bots and their brain immediately says, wow, that's a bot. But this technology makes more people susceptible to being fooled.
So here's a very, you know, I guess the saving grace is that it's very expensive to run this bot, at least for now.
For now.
But But here's a really simple case, right? That's just so obvious of how someone could use this for evil, right? There's all those people who call up old people and try to trick them into thinking, tech support or something. They steal all their money, right? And they have these call centers, mostly in India, right?
Yep.
You can watch on YouTube all those channels where they bust those people, right? And it's like the call centers are full of real humans, right? In India, calling up, citizens of other countries trying to scam them.
And while this is effectively a mechanical
bot, right, if you could get the bot to make those calls, you could get now one person could scam the whole world, keep all the money, and not have to hire any call center people or rent any office space or have any, right?
Same thing that happened with spam. Spam appeared because you could just automate sending ridiculous emails to millions and millions of people, and if only 1% of them fall for it, you still make a ton of money. It costs you nothing. It's way cheaper than mass mailers that used to be the way scams propagated.
Right. And then how are the anti-scam people, what are they going to do? What can they do about that? Right. It's like, it's going to be really hard. It's not like you can call up, the AI can't really be intimidated.
Well, imagine these AIs start texting every old person in America pretending to be their son and saying Dad, Grandpa, I'm in jail. I need $50 for bail. Dad, Grandpa, help me.
And it actually believed, right? It actually talked like their grandchild, right? Not just like a grandchild, but theirs specifically, like maybe knew things about their grandchild and was like...
I have already had to block people I otherwise liked on social media networks like Twitter because I would see them in my mentions arguing with bots. Like, how do you not see it's not a bot? The better this technology gets, the more people will fail that reverse Turing test and interact with bots they think are people.
Yeah. I think you could also see situations, right? How many online platforms, right? Whether it's a game or a social network or whatever, right? It's like if you try to start something these days, it's really hard because it's like, I'll make a video platform. It's like YouTube exists. What are you going to do, right? You got to have the network effect, right? Get this user base up, right? To then get your, to have your platform be worth using. You can make the best video site in the universe, but it's not the software that makes it great. It's all the users and the content that they're uploading, and YouTube already has that. So it's like, right? Or if it's not the...
So here,
I could make a Twitter really easily, but it doesn't have all the people that are on Twitter. So whatever. But what if I artificially filled up my brand new app, right? With a bunch of AI generated garbage, but it was actually legitimate content that people found interesting and believed was real people. And that caused, I basically fake the network effect to give myself fake customers to defraud investors into thinking I have users and when I don't.
Yep, make a social media network. Put DALL-E. DALL-E version 2.0 is putting great illustrations on it, and then your GPT 10,000 algorithm has 1 million people sharing and resharing and interacting with and responding to that original bot.
You got your Twitch channel and you're trying to get whatever status, right? And you don't have enough users, but you could do people do the botting. But guess what? The botting, is kind of obvious. But what if all those bots are chatting in Twitch chat in a human believable way and nobody can tell that those are not Twitch?
And we are already seeing this today. It's just, if you listen to Geek Nights, you're probably the kind of person who recognizes when a bot comes into the chat, but a lot of people already today don't.
Nope. And so, the fact that the bot is now advanced to the level where the AI researcher person, whatever issues they may have, believes it's sentient, means it's too advanced to probably be safe for anyone to be using without oversight and regulation or at all. Like, what's the legitimate use of this thing, right? It's like, So forget ethics. Here are some fascinating uses. One, scaling out various types of entrapment schemes from law enforcement at scale. Like, that's a way to do it. They go out to find people who are prone to, say, engaging in right-wing extremism, and then basically act like you're basically pull them into a fake network of similar-minded people when actually it's all just bots until eventually they do something. Why don't you do that then?
I mean, you could. You probably could.
I'm saying, why don't you do that?
Because I got a day job.
That's a good idea.
I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm saying these are practicable ideas.
Okay.
An example of an app you could sell an app where you load it with all your own information and you use it. You pick people on your contact list, like say you're the kind of person who doesn't like to talk to your mom. You tell it to maintain your relationship with your mom and just give you a feed of updates of what your mom's up to, but it talks to your mom on a day-to-day basis and she doesn't realize it.
It seems like a bad idea.
I didn't say it's a good idea. I said it's a practicable idea that I think you can make money selling such an app, and I think a lot of people would buy it.
Yeah, and then it tells your mom something not great.
Yep. Well, that's when the person who made the app, one, starts deep faking you and all your friends and scams them for money, and two, blackmails you. So this technology.
You also have to realize that, like, you know, if you any such at least with the current levels of technology, performance-wise, right? Such a bot, if you were to use it in that way, would have to run in the cloud. You couldn't run the whole thing on someone's phone, right? So you're going to have to send all your chats and all your mom's chats, all your full mom conversation to this cloud service, unencrypted, so that they can process it.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're basically, right? So now whoever runs this service, even if the service itself and what it does for the customer, we agree is legitimate and ethical, you now have a company that has access to all of these private conversations in an unencrypted fashion, right? And even if they have a good privacy policy and abide by it, it is dangerous to have all of that data in a place.
Yep, and there are technological solutions to that problem, but if the Internet of Things has taught us anything, no controls will ever be put on top of pretty much anything anyone builds.
Anyway, all right. Do we have anything else to say? Because I'm hungry.
I think we can wrap up there. So we should be on our pretty much regular Geek Night schedule for the foreseeable future, unless the Rangers make the Stanley Cup again. In the foreseeable future.
Another 12 months.
Yeah.
If it happens at all. Right?
The only danger to you is if, well, I guess, if there's a particularly compelling reason to be outside that happens to be a Geek Nights day, or I don't know. Anyway, just going to stop right there. And stopped.